Onibaba is a drama horror film that's written and directed by Kaneto Shindo that came out in 1964. So, Onibaba was last week's patron poll winner, and it actually won in a tiebreaker poll against The Innocents. And at first, I was a little bit upset at that because The Innocents is a film that I've heard nothing but great things about. A lot of you guys have been giving it nothing but praise, so it's an older classic horror film that I've been really wanting to watch for quite some time, but at the same time, Kaneto Shindo did write and direct Kaneto, which is a film that I really adored quite a bit. So at the same time, I really couldn't get that upset because Onibaba was definitely a film that was pretty high up on my most anticipated Criterion films to watch. And I really gotta say that Onibaba did not disappoint in the slightest. I would caution everybody and let everybody know that this is not really a film that I would call a horror film. This was definitely less horror-esque than I expected, at least in the traditional sense. But I do believe it does have some horror elements to it. And even though this film didn't fall as heavily into the horror category as I expected it to, that did not in the slightest take away from this film's effectiveness or its value. This film is a lot more down to earth than Kaneto, which is something that I didn't quite expect going into it. And I think that really works in its favor because throughout most of this film, especially in the first and second act, I did start to realize, like, damn, this is a film that actually chooses to explore a lot more into genuine, real human issues that have to do with survival and loneliness and just the human condition overall. And even like war and economic politics. And I liked that that's what this film is going for in the first and second act. And I was a little bit worried that if this film took a more supernatural approach in the third act, that it might take away from what was working for it. And luckily enough, it didn't. And I think that really worked towards the film's favor. But before I dive more into that, in terms of the aesthetic value, this film is beautifully shot. Wonderfully scored. There's not much musical score in this film, but when it's in there, I think it's very effective, very unique, and not only does it build suspense very well, but it does have a more chilling aspect to its sound. But yeah, the cinematography as well, I think is very well realized, very well captured. There's a lot of slow motion shots of the grasslands, and a lot of that just does a great job at immersing you into this film's setting and into its world, and also doing a great job at really sucking you in into this film's kind of ominous and dark atmosphere, because this film is quite dark, and as I mentioned in the beginning of this review, even though it's quite hard to really characterize this film as a horror film, it is dark, and this film certainly does not shy away from expressing the realities and the truths of who we are as human beings. And that is definitely something that I really loved about this film. I love the way that it was able to express these things about not only who we are as human beings, but in terms of these characters. Because even though the main character of this film, which I guess it's okay to characterize her as the main character, but it's the one that plays the stepmother. And I can see a lot of people saying that she wasn't really a likable character, and they didn't really care about what happened to her character at the end of the day. But I think that her character was very well expressed, and I think, yes, even though that you can describe her as very jealous and incredibly selfish, all of that is just stemming from elements of survival. Because a lot of what really drives these characters' motivations in this film has pretty much everything to do with survival, and it's really the kind of economic hardship that's brought on by the war in their country that kind of forces them to make certain decisions that they wouldn't normally make. And it goes back to them feeling like they have to do these things because it's the only way they can truly survive and flourish as a person. That's why I didn't really mind the kind of slow building and slow burn approach to this film, because I would describe this as more of a slow burn approach to filmmaking. Because this film does keep a lot of its kind of sensational and theatrical elements until pretty much the last 10 minutes of the film. And even then, even though I think the third act and the ending is fantastic and incredibly suspenseful, I can see a lot of people not really finding it to be all that climactic, especially since this film decides to end on a cliffhanger that pretty much allows every audience member to just come up with their own interpretations on what they think this film leads up to and what happens to a certain character. It just has the artistic ballsiness to just end on a scene that is going to frustrate a lot of people. But to me, it's something that I really loved. I love that artistic risk, and for me, it really elevates the film, because throughout this entire film, maybe through the first and second act, I thought, okay, maybe this is at most on par with Kaneto. But once the final 10 minutes hit, I knew that I liked this a bit more than Kaneto. And that's saying a lot, because I really liked Kaneto. I have a review on that, by the way. If you haven't checked it out, please go check it out. But I'm a huge fan of the last 10 or 15 minutes of this film. And I also really love the fact that this film was able to find a way to incorporate a sort of comment on religious behavior in terms of how this film is able to express that religion oftentimes can be used as a tool to implant fear into people or somebody in particular to kind of manipulate them in order to get them to do what you want them to do. And it's actually incorporated into the film in a really crucial way that's pretty vital to the plot and the characters. And I love that. I thought it was incorporated in a very intellectual way that really impressed me. And sexuality is something that is a huge element to this film, because again, sexuality is something that is essential to the human condition, but also just circles back to the fact that it is a gigantic part of our own survival and jealousy. And I love the fact that the traditional Japanese mask that's used in this film, that's pretty iconic, that most people can at least recognize. That Japanese mask, at least from my very surface level research, if somebody wants to correct me, please go ahead. But in general, that mask actually symbolizes a jealous woman. And the way that it's actually used in the film felt very natural and incredibly intentional and purposeful. I love that it wasn't one of those cases where a filmmaker just wants to use a scary mask to try to invoke a reaction. Even though, yes, it's there in a reactionary sense, it also has its artistic purposes that I think are beautifully incorporated into the film. But yeah, I love this film quite a bit. There's many elements about this film that really impressed me. And even though this isn't the most horror-esque film in the traditional sense, I still would recommend this film in the month of Spooktober. So I'm going to give Onibaba a soft 9 out of 10. Well, that's all I gotta say about Onibaba. If you really enjoy what I had to say about the film, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.